The grand chamber stretched so far that its ceiling disappeared into artificial clouds. Delegates from across the galaxy stood in their designated sections, their forms as varied as the stars themselves. Some floated in containment fields, beings of pure energy. Others towered on multiple legs, their crystalline bodies refracting the light. The Galactic Assembly had stood for 10,000 years, and its chamber reflected that ancient glory. At the center of everything sat the celestial throne. Ji-Ho stared at it from his position in the human delegation area. The throne was enormous, carved from some material that seemed to be solid light frozen in time. It glowed faintly, pulsing with colors that shouldn't exist. Ancient texts of the predecessors had created it before they vanished, leaving it as their final gift to younger races. The problem was simple. Nobody could use it. For 10,000 years, every species in the assembly had tried. Their greatest champions, wisest scholars, and most powerful warriors had all approached the throne. Each time, nothing happened. The throne remained cold and silent, beautiful but useless. Eventually, most species stopped trying. It became a monument to a mystery that would never be solved. Ji-Ho pulled his attention away from the throne as Ambassador Suji stepped up to the human platform. She was addressing the Council of Seven, the leaders who actually ran the assembly. Her voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. The human delegation requests permission to survey the Southern Quadrant mining rights, Suji said, her tone professional and calm. One of the seven responded immediately. The Veldrani representative was a towering crystal being who had held their seat for 3,000 years. Their voice echoed like wind through caves. The humans have been members for barely 2 centuries. Such resources are allocated based on seniority and contribution. Ji-Ho had heard similar responses 100 times. Humans were the newest members of the assembly, the youngest species to achieve faster-than-light travel and make contact with galactic civilization. To races that measured their histories in tens of thousands of years, humans were children playing at politics. The session continued with various delegates discussing trade routes, territorial disputes, and resource allocations. Ji-Ho tried to pay attention, but his eyes kept drifting back to the throne. As a xenorchaeologist, he had spent 15 years studying predecessor artifacts. They fascinated him in ways he couldn't fully explain. Beside him, Hana noticed his distraction. She leaned over and whispered, "You're staring at it again." "There's something different today," Ji-Ho whispered back. "Can't you feel it?" Hana was his closest colleague, an engineer who specialized in reverse engineering ancient technologies. She looked at the throne, her eyes narrowing. "Different how?" "I'm not sure. It's like a vibration, or a frequency just at the edge of hearing. The assembly has scanned that thing with every piece of technology they have," Hana said quietly. "If there was something to detect, they would have found it thousands of years ago." Ji-Ho knew she was right. He also knew what he felt was real. The session ended several hours later. Delegates began filing out of the chamber, returning to their quarters or heading to various social gatherings. The political work of the assembly never really stopped. Ji-Ho remained in his seat, watching the chamber empty. Suji approached him, her expression curious. "You planning to sleep here?" "I want to run some scans," Ji-Ho said, pulling out his portable analysis kit. "Just for my own research." Suji studied him for a moment. She had been a diplomat long enough to recognize when someone was onto something. "What kind of scans?" "Neural pattern recognition. I've been working on a theory about how predecessor technology interfaces with biological consciousness. Most species have tried matching energy signatures or quantum states. But what if the throne responds to something more basic? Thought patterns, emotional wavelengths. That's been tried before," Suji said, but she didn't sound dismissive. She sounded thoughtful. Not with human neural patterns, Jiho replied. We weren't around for 99% of those attempts. Hana had joined them now, her own scanning equipment already active. The energy readings are actually kind of interesting. There's a fluctuation I haven't seen in other predecessor artifacts. Suji looked between them both. I'll give you 2 hours before the night security protocols activate. After that, you'll need special permission to be in here. As Suji left, Jiho and Hana set up their equipment around the throne. They worked in silence, taking readings from multiple angles. The throne towered above them, easily large enough to seat someone 3 times human size. Up close, its beauty was almost painful to look at. The surface seemed to shift and flow like liquid, but remained solid when touched. Neural patterns are spiking, Hana said, checking her readouts. When you move closer, the fluctuations increase. Jiho stepped right up to the throne. He could feel it now, stronger than before. It was like standing next to a powerful generator, except the energy wasn't physical. It resonated in his mind, his thoughts, his awareness. This is going to sound crazy, he said slowly, but I think it recognizes me. Recognizes you specifically? Hana asked. Or recognizes humans in general? I don't know. Maybe both. Hana ran another scan, then another. Her expression shifted from curiosity to excitement. Jiho, the quantum signatures are responding to human brain wave patterns. Not Veldrani. Not Cortesh. Human. It's been sitting here for thousands of years, waiting for us. Jiho finished. They stared at the throne, the implications settling over them like a heavy weight. If Jiho was right, if the throne truly was responding to human presence, it would change everything. The elder species believed the throne was a failed experiment, a beautiful mystery with no solution. Learning that it had simply been waiting for humanity to arrive would shake the foundations of galactic politics. We need more proof, Hana said finally. A lot more. The Council isn't going to believe us based on a few energy readings. I know, Jiho agreed. But I also know I'm right. This thing has been dormant for 10,000 years. Every species has tried and failed to activate it. But we're different somehow. The predecessors made it for us. That's a bold claim. I know. But look at the data. Hana did look, running analysis after analysis. The more she examined the readings, the more convinced she became. The throne was responding to human neural patterns in ways it never had for other species. The evidence was subtle but unmistakable. Finally, as the 2-hour mark approached, they packed up their equipment. Walking out of the chamber, Jiho cast one last look at the throne. It sat there in its eternal vigil, glowing softly in the dim light. Tomorrow, he would request permission to approach it. Tomorrow, he would ask the Council to let him attempt what thousands of champions had failed to do. They would probably laugh at him. The elder species would call it human arrogance. Another example of the youngest race overestimating their importance. But Jiho knew something they didn't. The throne wasn't dead. It had never been dead, that it was just waiting for someone to come home. The council chamber erupted in noise. Delegates from 100 worlds spoke at once, their voices mixing into an incomprehensible roar. At the center of it all, Jiho stood calmly, waiting for order to be restored. The Veldrani council member raised one crystalline appendage, and silence fell immediately. Their voice carried the weight of 3,000 years of authority. Let me understand this correctly. You, a human who has been part of this assembly for less time than most species take to reach maturity, believe you can activate the celestial throne? I don't believe I can activate it, Jiho said clearly. I believe it's already responding to human presence. My scans show clear neural pattern recognition that wasn't present with other species. A member of the Cortesh Collective spoke next, their hive mind voice coming from thousands of individuals speaking as one. We attempted the trial 3,000 times across 15,000 years. We used quantum consciousness mapping, collective mental projection, and synchronized neural harmonics. Are you suggesting we missed something a 2-century-old species detected with basic scanning equipment? Yes, Geo said simply. Because the throne wasn't looking for your neural patterns. It was looking for ours. The chamber exploded again. This time Ambassador Suji stepped forward, her voice cutting through the noise. Council members, delegates, please. If the throne is truly dead as we all believe, what harm can one more attempt cause? Let Jiho try. When he fails like everyone before him, we can all return to our normal business. The silence that followed was different. Calculating. Suji had played it perfectly. By framing Jiho's attempt as harmless, she made opposition look petty. The elder species couldn't admit they feared a human succeeding where they had failed. That would give the fear legitimacy. The council conferred briefly. Finally, the Veldrani spoke again. Very well. 7 days from now, you may approach the throne under formal trial conditions. The event will be broadcast across all assembly worlds. When you fail, perhaps humanity will learn some humility. Jiho bowed respectfully and left the chamber. Outside, Hannah was waiting with Taiyang, Jiho's oldest friend. Taiyang commanded a human fleet stationed near Luminar Prime, the Assembly's capital world. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with the bearing of someone who had spent decades in military service. Well? Taiyang asked. 7 days, Jiho replied. They agreed. Of course they agreed, Taiyang said. They think you're going to embarrass yourself and all of humanity in front of the entire galaxy. That's definitely what they think, Jiho agreed. Hana pulled out her portable computer, already working. We have 7 days to prepare. I need to run more analysis on those neural patterns. If we're wrong about this, we're not wrong, Jiho said quietly. The next week passed in a blur of preparation. Hana worked 18-hour days analyzing every scrap of data they had on the throne. She discovered something remarkable buried in Earth's genetic databases. Human DNA contained quantum markers that didn't appear in any other known species. They were subtle, easily missed, but unmistakably artificial. Someone modified human DNA, Hannah explained, showing Jiho the data. Probably millions of years ago. These markers are designed to interface with predecessor technology. You think the predecessors visited Earth? Jiho asked. I think they did more than visit. I think they seeded humanity with these markers deliberately. We might have been created specifically for this purpose. The implications were staggering. If true, it meant humanity wasn't random. The predecessors had designed them, shaped them, prepared them for something. But what? Yuna, a brilliant human scientist who had been studying predecessor artifacts in another sector, arrived on Luminar Prime to help. She brought additional data that supported Hannah's findings. The quantum markers in human DNA matched energy signatures from the throne perfectly. The science is solid, Yuna told them. But science won't matter if the throne doesn't respond. Everything depends on what happens when Jiho touches it. The night before the trial, Jiho couldn't sleep. He found Taiyang on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. Nervous? Taiyang asked. Terrified, Jiho admitted. What if I'm wrong? What if this is just human arrogance like they all think? Taiyang was quiet for a moment. I've known you for 20 years. You've never been arrogant. Curious, yes. Stubborn, definitely. But never arrogant. If you believe the throne will respond, then I believe you. And if I'm wrong, then I'll have a ship ready to get you off this planet before the mocking gets too bad, Taiyang said with a slight smile. Then his expression grew serious. But Jiho, if you're right, everything changes. The power structure of the entire galaxy shifts. Some species won't accept that peacefully. I know. If something goes wrong tomorrow, if there's danger, I'll get you out. Even if it means defying the entire assembly. Ji-ho clasped his friend's shoulder. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. The day of the trial arrived. The grand chamber was packed with delegates from every member species. Cameras broadcast the event to hundreds of worlds. Millions, perhaps billions, would watch Ji-ho either make history or become a galactic joke. He walked to the center of the chamber alone. Assembly protocol required it. The throne towered above him, glowing with its eternal light. Up close, he could feel that vibration again, stronger now. It sang in his bones, resonated in his thoughts. Ambassador Suji stood in the human section, her face carefully neutral. Hana and Yuna were beside her, their scanning equipment active. Taiyang watched from a viewing gallery, his hand near his communicator in case emergency extraction became necessary. The Veldrani council members spoke formally. Ji-ho of Earth, you stand before the celestial throne, created by the predecessors as a gift to all species. 10,000 years of trials have proven it cannot be activated. Do you still wish to attempt what all others have failed? I do, Ji-ho said clearly. Then approach. Ji-ho walked forward. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if reality itself was pressing down on him. He reached the throne and stopped, staring up at its impossible beauty. The chamber was absolutely silent. Thousands of aliens watched, most expecting nothing. Some hoping for nothing. A few, like the human delegation, hoping for everything. Ji-ho reached out and placed his hand on the throne's armrest for a heartbeat. Nothing happened. Then the throne exploded with light. It wasn't gentle illumination. It was an eruption of radiance that filled the entire chamber, so bright that delegates shielded their eyes. Energy poured from the throne in waves, and Ji-ho felt his consciousness pulled away from his body. He was falling into something vast. The throne wasn't just a seat. It was a doorway, a gateway, a bridge to something beyond normal reality. His mind expanded, touching networks of information that stretched across space and time. In the chamber, Ji-ho's body stood rigid, his hand still touching the throne. Light wrapped around him like a cocoon. The assembled delegates stared in shock. The throne, silent for 10,000 years, had finally awakened. And it had chosen a human. Ji-ho existed in a place between moments. Time flowed differently here, stretching and compressing like elastic. He wasn't in the chamber anymore. His body remained there, standing before the throne, but his consciousness had been pulled into something far larger. The predecessor archives. Information surrounded him in every direction, not as data or text, but as pure understanding. Millions of years of accumulated knowledge pressed against his mind. He could see the rise and fall of civilizations, the birth and death of stars, the careful cultivation of younger races across thousands of worlds. The predecessors had been real. They weren't gods or myths. They had been living beings once, though their form was difficult for Ji-ho's mind to comprehend. They had reached a level of advancement that made current galactic civilization look primitive by comparison. Then they had done something extraordinary. They had evolved beyond physical form entirely, transforming themselves into beings of pure energy and consciousness. They had transcended the material universe, but before leaving, they had created fail-safes, tools and tests left behind to guide the younger races that would come after them. The celestial throne was one of these tools, perhaps the most important one. Ji-ho felt the throne's purpose flow into his understanding. It was designed to activate only when a specific type of species emerged. Not the strongest or most advanced. Not the oldest or wisest. The throne was waiting for a species with particular qualities that the predecessors had identified as crucial. Adaptability, the ability to change and grow in response to new challenges. Emotional depth. the capacity to feel and empathize across vast differences, irrational hope, the stubborn refusal to accept defeat even when logic said to give up, pattern recognition in chaos, the ability to see connections others missed. Humanity possessed all of these traits, but the understanding came with a price. The predecessors hadn't left just because they wanted to transcend. They had left because they had discovered something terrible, a threat so vast that even their advanced civilization couldn't face it alone. The void, convergence, knowledge of it flooded into Jiho's mind. The void convergence was an extra-dimensional force, something that existed outside normal space and time. It moved through the universe like a cosmic predator, consuming entire galaxies. It fed on matter and energy. Yes, but more than that, it fed on consciousness itself. The predecessors had detected it approaching their galaxy millions of years ago. They had spent thousands of years trying to find a way to stop it. Every attempt failed. The convergence was too vast, too powerful, too fundamentally wrong for any single species to defeat. So the predecessors had changed their strategy. Instead of trying to stop it themselves, they would prepare future species to face it together. They seeded worlds with life, nudged evolution in certain directions, and created tools like the throne to guide younger races toward unity. The throne would activate when a species capable of unifying others emerged, not through conquest or force, but through genuine connection. A species that could inspire cooperation across impossible differences. Jiho saw the calculations, the projections, the timeline. The void convergence had been crawling through the intergalactic void for millions of years, moving slowly but inevitably. It had consumed dozens of galaxies before this one, and it would arrive in 30 years. The knowledge hit Jiho like a physical blow. 30 years. One human generation. The galaxy had 3 decades to prepare for a threat that had destroyed civilizations far more advanced than anything currently alive. The archives showed him more. Blueprints for weapons and shields that could hurt the convergence. Designs for engines that could move fleets faster than current technology allowed. Strategies for fighting an enemy that existed partially outside normal reality. But all of it required cooperation. The technology was too complex for any single species to build alone. It needed the crystalline computation of the Veldrani, the hive mind coordination of the Cortesh, the adaptive engineering of humans, and the unique abilities of a dozen other species working together. The predecessors had designed it that way deliberately. The galaxy would unite, or it would die. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the connection ended. Jiho's consciousness snapped back into his body like a rubber band released. He gasped, stumbling backward from the throne. His legs gave out, and he collapsed to the chamber floor. Hana and Taiyang were there, instantly, catching him before he hit the ground. The chamber was in chaos. Delegates shouted in 100 languages. The Council of 7 demanded order, but nobody listened. The throne still glowed, brighter than it had in 10,000 years. Its light pulsed steadily, alive and active, for the first time in recorded history. Jiho struggled to focus. His mind felt too full, overstuffed with information it wasn't designed to hold. Hana was saying something, but the words took a moment to make sense. Jiho, can you hear me? What happened? Archives, Jiho managed to say. His voice sounded rough, barely his own. The predecessors left archives, knowledge, warning. Ambassador Suji pushed through the crowd, her diplomatic authority clearing a path. Get him to medical immediately. No, Jiho said, forcing himself to stand on shaky legs. He looked around at the assembled delegates, at the cameras still broadcasting to hundreds of worlds. This moment was being witnessed by billions. What he said next would change everything. I need to address the council, he said. You need medical attention, Suji insisted. The medical attention can wait. The galaxy can't. Jiho pulled himself free of Hana and Taiyang's supporting hands. He stood on his own, facing the Council of Seven. I know what the throne is. I know why it was created. And I know what's coming. The Veldrani council member spoke, their voice tight with something that might have been fear. What did you see? The predecessors didn't vanish. They evolved beyond physical form. But before they left, they discovered a threat. Something called the Void Convergence. It's an extra-dimensional force that consumes galaxies. It's been moving toward us for millions of years. The chamber went absolutely silent. It will arrive in 30 years, Jiho continued. The throne was created to activate when a species capable of unifying the galaxy emerged. It's giving me access to predecessor technology. Weapons, shields, engines far beyond anything we currently have. But the technology can only be built through cooperation. No single species can create these defenses alone. This is impossible, the Cortesh Collective said, but their voice lacked conviction. The throne is active, Jiho said simply. For 10,000 years, every species failed to activate it. Today, it responded to a human. That's not coincidence. The predecessors designed it this way. They prepared for this moment. Yuna stepped forward, her portable computer displaying data. I'm detecting energy signatures from the throne that match nothing in our databases. Whatever happened to Jiho, the throne has definitely changed state. It's active. The council members looked at each other. The weight of Jiho's words was settling over the chamber like a heavy blanket. If he was telling the truth, everything had changed. The political squabbles and territorial disputes that dominated assembly business suddenly seemed trivial. We need to verify this, Veldrani said finally. This claim is too large to accept without evidence. I can provide evidence, Jiho said. The throne gave me access to predecessor databases. I can share technological specifications, historical records, and calculations about the Convergence's approach. But we need to start now. 30 years sounds like a long time, but it's not. Not when we're preparing to face something that destroyed civilizations far more advanced than ours. Ambassador Suji moved to Jiho's side, her political instincts fully engaged. The human delegation moved for an emergency session to review all evidence related to this claim. We also request permission to begin preliminary research into the technologies described. The debate that followed lasted hours. Some delegates believed Jiho immediately. Others demanded proof. A few suggested the entire thing was an elaborate human trick, though they couldn't explain how humans had managed to activate a throne that had resisted all attempts for 10,000 years. Finally, exhausted and overwhelmed, Jiho allowed himself to be taken to medical facilities. As he left the chamber, he looked back at the throne one last time. It glowed steadily, a beacon of hope and warning combined. The galaxy was awake now. The question was whether it could unite in time to survive what was coming. 3 months after the awakening, the galaxy was tearing itself apart. Jiho stood in a command center deep within Luminar Prime's government district, watching data streams from hundreds of worlds. Protests, riots, political upheaval. Half the assembly believed his warning about the Void Convergence. The other half thought it was a human power grab wrapped in manufactured fear. Another system has declared neutrality, Hana reported, updating the tactical display. The map showed the galaxy color-coded by allegiance. Green for supporters of the Unity Initiative. Red for the Rejection Coalition. Gray for neutral systems. There was far too much red and gray. Yuna worked at another console, processing astronomical data. Over the past months, she had confirmed Jiho's claims with independent observations. The Void Convergence was real. Long-range sensors detected its approach, a vast distortion in space-time creeping toward the galaxy's outer rim. We're losing momentum, Ambassador Suji said, reviewing political reports. The Veldrani are still undecided. Without their support, we'll never get the crystalline computation networks needed for the shield generators. The problem was simple but devastating. The technology from the predecessor archives required cooperation between species. Human engineers could build the frameworks. Veldrani crystalline structures could process the quantum calculations. Cortesh hive minds could coordinate the massive construction efforts. But without all species working together, the defenses couldn't be completed. The rejection coalition was led by the Talic Sphere, an old and influential species that controlled significant military resources. They argued that the entire Void Convergence story was fiction designed to make humans relevant in galactic politics. Why should anyone believe that the youngest species had suddenly become crucial to everyone's survival? Tai Yang entered the command center, still wearing his fleet uniform. The rejection coalition just seized control of the Kepler manufacturing stations. They're blocking access to rare materials we need for the engine cores. That's an act of war, Suji said. They're calling it protective custody, Tai Yang replied, claiming they're preventing humans from monopolizing strategic resources. Jiho rubbed his eyes. He hadn't slept properly in weeks. The weight of knowledge from the archives pressed on him constantly. He could see the timeline counting down. 30 years had become 29 years and 9 months. Every day wasted was a day they couldn't afford to lose. We need to try again with the Veldrani, he said. They're the key. If they join us, others will follow. They've refused 3 meetings, Suji pointed out. Then we try a 4th time. Before Suji could respond, alarms blared. Yuna pulled up new data, her face going pale. We have a problem. A big one. Someone just tried to destroy one of the Unity fleet construction facilities in the Outer Rim. The tactical display shifted, showing a shipyard in flames. The attack had been coordinated and brutal. Dozens of ships destroyed. Thousands dead. The facility had been building prototype vessels using predecessor designs. Who? Tai Yang demanded. Unknown, Yuna said. But the attack patterns matched Talic Sphere military doctrine. The room went silent. If the rejection coalition was moving from political opposition to active sabotage, the situation had just escalated dramatically. Ji-ho made a decision. I'm going to the throne. What? Hannah looked up sharply. Why? Because I need more answers. The archives showed me the threat and the technology to fight it. But they didn't show me how to unite a divided galaxy. There has to be more. The last time you connected with the throne, you collapsed, Suji said. The medical team said another session could be dangerous. Everything is dangerous now, Jiho replied. We're running out of time and options. An hour later, Jiho stood before the celestial throne once more. This time, he wasn't alone. Hannah insisted on coming. So did Minji, a human psychologist who had been working on multi-species integration strategies. Hyan, a tactical officer from Tai Yang's fleet, joined them as well. The council had granted permission reluctantly. Several alien delegates also stood in the chamber, including a Veldrani observer and a neutral Cortesh representative. They wanted to witness whatever happened. Jiho approached the throne and placed his hand on the armrest. The connection was immediate and powerful. His consciousness expanded, pulling the others with him. Hana gasped as she felt the archives open around them. Minji's mind touched the vast network of information. Hyan experienced the flow of predecessor knowledge. But this time, Jiho went deeper. He pushed past the technological blueprints and historical records, searching for something specific. The predecessors had left this system to help unite the galaxy. There had to be more guidance about how to actually achieve that unity. He found it buried in layers of code and consciousness. A message preserved across millions of years. The predecessors spoke directly into his understanding. They showed him that the void convergence couldn't be defeated by weapons alone. The threat fed on division, entropy, and despair. Every civilization it had consumed had been fighting among themselves when it arrived. Division made species vulnerable. The only defense was genuine unity. Not forced cooperation through threats or treaties. Not temporary alliances born of fear. Real connection, built on trust and mutual understanding. This was why the throne had waited for humanity. Not because humans were stronger or smarter than elder species, but because humans possessed something the older civilizations had lost over thousands of years. Of political maneuvering and hierarchical thinking, humans formed emotional bonds instinctively. They sought friendship across differences. They trusted first and questioned later. Older species saw this as naivety. The predecessors had recognized it as the most valuable trait in the galaxy. The vision showed Jiho what needed to happen. The throne's true purpose wasn't to create a single leader. It was to create a bridge between species. A way for different civilizations to genuinely understand each other at a level deeper than politics or trade. When Jiho pulled back from the connection, he found tears streaming down his face. Beside him, Hannah was crying too. Minji and Hyan looked shaken but determined. The Veldrani observer stepped forward, their crystalline form pulsing with light. "What did you see?" Jiho turned to face them, to face all the assembled witnesses. "I saw the truth. The throne isn't meant to give power to one species. It's meant to share power with all species. The predecessors wanted us to stop competing and start truly connecting." He walked back to the throne and placed both hands on it, reaching into the connection with deliberate focus. The throne responded, expanding its consciousness. Light flowed from it, creating new seats around the original. Not physical thrones, but seats of pure energy, each one attuned to different species. "The celestial throne becomes the circle of unity," Jiho said. "Not one leader, not one species. All of us together, with equal access to everything the predecessors left behind." The Veldrani observer approached slowly. They reached out and touched one of the new seats. Light flowed around them as they connected to the archives. For the first time in their 3,000-year life, they experienced the full scope of what the predecessors had created. They pulled back, their voice filled with something that sounded like wonder. "I understand now. We've been approaching this wrong for 10,000 years. The throne wasn't testing our worthiness to rule. It was testing our willingness to share." Within hours, word of what happened spread across the galaxy. The human who had activated the throne had then given away his exclusive access to it. He had transformed it from a symbol of individual power into a platform for collective cooperation. The gesture shattered the Rejection Coalition's primary argument. How could this be a human power grab when humans were actively sharing the power they'd gained? Species that had been neutral started joining the Unity Initiative. The Veldrani officially committed their support. The Cortesh Collective began mobilizing their construction capabilities. Even some members of the Rejection Coalition quietly switched sides, but not all of them. The Talic Sphere and their closest allies refused to acknowledge the change. They saw sharing the throne's power as weakness, not strength. Their sabotage operations continued. TAEYANG coordinated the military response to these attacks, while Suji managed the complex diplomacy of keeping the coalition together. Hana worked with Veldrani engineers to begin building the first shield generators. Yuna tracked the convergence's approach, watching it grow closer with each passing day. Jiho stood at the center of it all, connected to dozens of species through the circle of unity. He could feel the galaxy slowly coming together. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't fast enough. But it was happening. 20-9 years remained until the void convergence arrived. The galaxy had finally started preparing to face it together. The question was whether they had started soon enough. That 20-8 years had passed since the awakening. Jiho stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, watching the assembled fleet stretch across the space before him. Thousands of ships from hundreds of species, all working together toward a common goal. It was the largest cooperative military force in galactic history. It still might not be enough. The void convergence had reached the galaxy's outer rim 6 months ago. Initial contact had been devastating. 3 outlying systems simply stopped existing. Not destroyed in the traditional sense. Erased. Every star, planet, and living being in those systems vanished as if they had never been. The convergence was worse than the predecessor archives had suggested. It didn't just consume matter and energy. It unraveled reality itself. Taiyan joined Jiho at the observation window. The fleet commander looked older now, his hair streaked with gray. 28 years of constant preparation had aged them all. The final shield generators are coming online. Hannah says we're at 97% coverage. And the remaining 3%? Jiho asked. Systems that refused to join the Unity Initiative. They're on their own. The rejection coalition had collapsed years ago, but some species still refused to participate. They believed their own defenses would be sufficient, or that the convergence would somehow pass them by. Jiho had stopped trying to convince them. You couldn't force people to accept help. Yuna's voice came over the communication system. All stations, we have new readings on the convergence approach. It's accelerating. Impact with the primary defense line in 72 hours. 72 hours. After 28 years of preparation, everything would be decided in 3 days. Jiho made his way to the Circle of Unity chamber. It had grown since that first day when he transformed the throne. Now, representatives from over 200 species could connect simultaneously, sharing thoughts and strategies in real time through the predecessor network. Ambassador Suji was already there, her hair now completely white, but her mind still sharp as ever. She had become the primary coordinator for diplomatic efforts, keeping the fragile alliance together through countless crises. Beside her sat Minji, who had developed the psychological frameworks that allowed different species to work together without constant conflict. Haiyan was present too, coordinating with Tai Yang on military strategy. Over the years, humans and aliens had learned to combine their tactical approaches, creating hybrid strategies that were more effective than anything a single species could devise. The Veldrani representative, the same one who had witnessed the throne's transformation so many years ago, pulsed with light as they connected to the network. The Cortesh collective joined, their hive mind presence filling the chamber with a sense of vast, organized thought. One by one, species connected. The Circle of Unity became active, minds linking across impossible differences, united by a single purpose. The convergence will hit our outer defense line first, Haiyan reported, displaying tactical data through the shared connection. Shield generators are positioned to create overlapping fields. If the shields hold, we can prevent it from advancing further while the fleet engages. If the shields hold, someone echoed. That was the critical question. The shields used predecessor technology, but they had never been tested against anything like the void convergence. We have to trust the predecessor designs, Jiho said. They faced this threat before. They knew what they were doing. They also failed, the Veldrani pointed out. The predecessors transcended rather than fight. What makes us think we can succeed where they couldn't? Because we're not alone, Jiho replied. The predecessors were one species, however advanced. We're 200 species working together. That's what they wanted. That's why they left the throne. The preparation had been monumental. Veldrani crystal networks processed quantum calculations across light years. Cortesh construction teams had built the shield generators, using designs that required perfect coordination between millions of workers. Human engineers adapted and modified predecessor blueprints to work with current technology. But more than technology, they had built something harder to quantify: trust, friendship, genuine connections across species barriers that had existed for thousands of years. Minji's psychological integration programs had helped. She had discovered that when species truly understood each other, when they stopped seeing aliens and started seeing people, cooperation became natural instead of forced. The final hours before contact passed intense preparation. Ships moved into position. Shield generators hummed with barely contained power. Every species in the Unity initiative held their breath. Then the sea. Convergence arrived at the defense line. Jiho watched from Unity Station as sensors tried to make sense of what they were seeing. The convergence didn't look like anything physical. It was a distortion in space-time, a wound in reality that spread like infection. Where it touched normal space, everything simply stopped being. Shields activating, Hana reported from the engineering deck. Power levels nominal. Field integrity holding. The convergence hit the shield barrier. The impact sent energy readings off the charts. Reality itself seemed to scream. But the shields held for exactly 17 seconds. Then sections started failing. The convergence didn't break through the shields. It found the gaps between them, the tiny imperfections in the coverage. It began to pour through. All fleet units, engage, Taiyang ordered. The Unity fleet surged forward, weapons firing, but conventional weapons were useless. Energy beams and missiles simply vanished when they touched the convergence. Ships that got too close were erased from existence. "We need a new strategy," Haiyan said urgently through the circle connection. "Weapons aren't working." Jiho felt something stirring in his connection to the throne. A deeper understanding trying to surface. He pushed his consciousness fully into the predecessor network, searching desperately for answers. The truth hit him like a physical blow. "It's not weapons," he said aloud. "The convergence feeds on division and entropy. We can't fight it with destruction. We need to fight it with unity." "I don't understand," Suji said. Chi-Ho turned to the assembled representatives in the circle. The predecessors transcended because they achieved perfect unity. Every member of their species connected into a single consciousness. That's what gave them the power to evolve beyond physical form. The convergence can't consume that kind of unified consciousness. "You want us to merge?" The Veldrani sounded shocked. "Not permanently, but through the circle, we can create a temporary unified field. A concentration of cooperative consciousness strong enough to repel the convergence." "That's never been attempted," the Cortesh Collective said. "Merging hundreds of different species into one consciousness could destroy us all." "So will the convergence if we don't try," Jiho replied. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Minji's voice came through the connection, calm and certain. "I've been preparing integration protocols for years. If every species is willing, I can guide the merger. But it has to be voluntary. Forced unity won't work." One by one, species agreed. The Veldrani, the Cortesh, humans, dozens of others. Not all species participated. Some couldn't overcome their fear. But enough agreed to make the attempt. Minji began the protocol. Through the circle of unity, consciousness began to merge. It was painful and beautiful simultaneously. Jiho felt his sense of self blur and expand. He was still himself, but he was also Hana, Taiyang, Suji, Yuna. He was the Veldrani representative and the Cortesh Collective. He was hundreds of beings thinking as one. The merged consciousness turned its attention to the void convergence. For the first time in its existence across millions of years and dozens of galaxies, the convergence encountered something it couldn't consume. The unified consciousness of 200 cooperating species created a field of such intense connection and harmony that the convergence recoiled. It wasn't a weapon. It was the opposite of everything the convergence represented. Where the convergence was division and entropy, the unified consciousness was cooperation and order. The battle that followed couldn't be described in conventional terms. It wasn't fought with ships or weapons. It was fought with will and unity. The merged consciousness pushed against the convergence, slowly forcing it back. Ships that had been in danger found themselves protected by fields of pure cooperative thought. Shield generators that had failed reactivated, powered by the combined will of thousands of species working as one. Slowly, impossibly, the convergence began to retreat. It took 3 days of continuous effort. 3 days where hundreds of species maintained their unity without breaking. It was exhausting. Some individuals couldn't maintain the connection and had to withdraw, but others took their place. Finally, the convergence pulled back beyond the galaxy's edge. It didn't flee exactly. It simply moved on, seeking easier prey. A galaxy truly unified was something it couldn't consume. When the merger finally ended and consciousness separated back into individual minds, Jiho found himself collapsed in the circle chamber. Around him, representatives from dozens of species were in similar states of exhaustion. But they had won. The void convergence, which had destroyed countless civilizations, had been turned away. Not by superior weapons or technology, but by something simpler and more powerful. Unity, connection, the willingness of different species to truly become one. Even if only temporarily. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy slowly returned to normal. But it was a different normal than before. Species that had experienced the merger couldn't go back to seeing each other as completely separate. They had been inside each other's minds. They had felt each other's thoughts and emotions. The political structures of the galaxy began to shift. The old hierarchies based on age and power seemed less important. The circle of unity became the primary governing body, with representatives from all species making decisions together. Jiho stood before the throne one final time. Months after the convergence had been repelled. It still glowed with steady light, but he understood it differently now. You knew, he said to the absent predecessors. You knew that the only way to defeat the convergence was to learn to truly unite. The throne wasn't just a warning system or a technology repository. It was a teaching tool. Hannah joined him, her hand slipping into his. We learned the lesson. Barely in time, Jiho said. But we learned it. Hannah smiled. And now every species in the galaxy knows what's possible when we stop competing and start connecting. Taiyang, Suji, Yuna, Minji, and Haiyan joined them. The humans who had been there from the beginning, who had helped guide the galaxy through its greatest crisis. They stood together, looking at the throne that had started everything. What happens now? Yuna asked. Now we build something better, Suji said. A galaxy that doesn't need an existential threat to work together. A civilization based on genuine unity instead of fear or necessity. Think we can do it? Taiyang asked. Jiho looked at his friends, at the aliens who had become partners and allies, at the throne that had brought them all together. He thought about 200 species merging their consciousness to face the impossible and winning. Yes, he said simply. We can do it. The throne pulsed with light, as if agreeing. Humanity hadn't saved the galaxy through superior strength or advanced technology. They had saved it by showing others how to care, how to connect, how to hope. The predecessors had been right to wait for them. The galaxy had awakened. And together, all species would build a future brighter than anything that had come before.